attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for today's YSS Powerhouse Presents session about serving homeschoolers. I'm Leah Langby from the Indian Head Federated Library System, and we are hosting this session, which is sponsored by the Youth Services section of the Wisconsin Library Association. The values statement of the Youth Services section is YSS advocates for professional empowerment, collaboration, and innovative, inclusive, and intentional service. Those are some pretty great values. And if you're not already a member of YSS, I encourage you to join. We are stronger together. So today, there we go. We have 4 YSS members joining us to talk about services for homeschoolers. We're all available to answer questions after today, and we'll also have some time at the end of today's session for questions and idea sharing. So if you have questions, please type them into the question panel as they occur to you, and we will get to them all at the end. If you have technical problems, also use the question box, and my wonderful colleague Lori Roholt is on hand with us today too. So if you have any technology hiccups or questions, you can ask in the question box and one of us will assist you. Today's session is being recorded, so if you want to share it with a colleague after the fact, you can find links on the IFLS web page, the YSS blog, and the YSS website later on. And then we'll also be sending out a link to that later too. Okay, so I am starting us off today with some general information about homeschooling in Wisconsin. I have a little bit of an insider's perspective on this. My husband and I, mostly my husband, homeschooled both of our daughters, one from first grade all the way through senior year. She's a senior this year. And that's not because we disapprove of public schools, which we think are incredible, but just to best respond to the needs of our family. So there's a variety of reasons, and we'll get to that in a little bit, why people choose to homeschool. But first of all, I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about who is homeschooling in Wisconsin. So the DPI collects stats that are self-reported by parents who are homeschooling. This does not include students who are doing virtual charter schools. Those are not counted in those stats, but those students might have some similar needs, and some of those students refer to themselves as being homeschooled, or some of those families do because they have some of the same things going on in terms of flexibility with schedules and things like that. It hovers around 2% of the school-age population in Wisconsin, but it does vary really drastically from district to district. Some districts have 0% homeschoolers, and there are nearly 20% of the kids on Washington Island are homeschooled. So it really depends on where you're living. So I really recommend checking this link, which these slides will also be available after the fact. But this link gives a district by district. You can look district by district or county by county, I think, who is homeschooled in your area, or not who, but how many people are homeschooled in your area. So that might give you a better idea of what you're dealing with in your community. It is more common to homeschool in elementary school than in high school too. So you may find that you have more kids up through middle school or something like that, and then a lot of times kids go to school in high school. So Wisconsin law has one of the most liberal homeschooling laws in the country. Homeschoolers aren't required to take any tests. In a lot of states they are. There are no specific credentials required for parents, which means that in some states parents have to have a teaching credential in order to do homeschooling at home. So In Wisconsin, that's not required. The only thing that's required is filing your paperwork and also providing 875 hours of sequential instruction for students in in the core subjects. And families do this in a variety of ways. So you might see families that just look like they're just kind of hanging out in the library during school hours. That does not mean that they aren't doing their 475 or 875 hours of sequential instruction. It means that there's a whole variety of ways. Some families do it for 4 hours a day for the whole year. Some families take a huge vacation in, September and October, and aren't aren't doing much homeschooling during those times or formal homeschooling during those times. Homeschoolers also tend to look at a lot of their activities as educational, and so that's another just thing to know. The Wisconsin Parents Association, which was established many years ago, many decades ago, is the reason that Wisconsin has such liberal laws. It's a very well organized group. They also provide helpful resources for families that are homeschooling, including they have regional representatives. So if you have people coming in who are like considering homeschooling and are looking for people to connect with, you might have some contacts that you know about, but you might also refer them to these regional representatives. They also provide you with an interpretation of the laws. They give suggestions for the early days of homeschooling for families who are just making that transition, and things like that. So they're a useful resource, that website. I recommend taking a peek at that. And maybe having that bookmarked for yourselves when you do get questions from families. So I'm also just wanting to provide a few other little pieces of background information. There are a lot of reasons for homeschooling. In fact, there are as many reasons and styles of homeschooling as there are families doing it. So many families cite religion as a reason. I think last statistic I read said 2/3 of families, but don't assume that that is the reason or that that is the only reason that families may have chosen to do this. A lot of times families are responding to the learning styles or needs of their children. I know several families who have kids with sensory issues or who are on the autism spectrum, for whom being in school is very difficult, but they're able to accommodate them a little more easily at home. That's not true of every child or every family. It's just that's one thing that happens. Some kids have health problems that make it hard for them. It takes a lot of energy to be in school all day, and they don't have that much energy, and it works better for them. Some kids respond better to hands-on learning, one-on-one, a faster pace or a slower pace. I know a couple of kids who were pulled out of school when they were transitioning from female to male, and that school was just a little bit too much of a fraught atmosphere for them. And so that was another reason for that family. So there's so many different needs that families may be trying to help address by homeschooling. Also could be educational philosophy, and lifestyle. So there are some parents who travel, or I knew one family that the dad worked from 3 to 11, and so would never have seen his kids if they didn't homeschool. So that was one family's solution. It wouldn't be every family's solution, but that was one thing they did. Some kids have just a crazy long bus ride. They live like an hour and a half from school or something crazy like that, and it's just not, if the family decides it's not the most economical use of time for that family. So there's a lot of different things, and many families have more than one reason. And that wasn't meant to be an exhaustive list, just some thoughts. Another thing to be aware of is that many homeschoolers, this isn't true of everyone, but for many homeschoolers, grade levels are less important. So if you If you ask a homeschooler many times, especially if they're younger, oh, what grade are you in? Which is such a typical question to ask a young kid. They will just be totally mystified and will like look at their parents and not be sure how to answer that. And it's not because they can't speak for themselves. It's because their grade level is not like emphasized as much in a homeschooling kind of environment, or maybe not emphasized at all. Also, because of that and because of some other reasons, sometimes homeschoolers respond less well to like, this is our program for third to sixth graders. This is our program for seventh to ninth graders. Because they don't identify as a grade level, sometimes it's harder for them to fit into those kinds of programs. So it's not that you shouldn't have programs like that, but just be aware of that might be something that they're kind of struggling with if as they try and figure out where they might have the best time in a program of yours. Related to that, many, but not all homeschooling families like to stick together. They're used to interacting with a wide age range. So you might also notice that sometimes kids can be more comfortable talking with adults than their peers are. So they're just used to kind of being in a more in a more mixed age group. So you might find that if you are offering things for families, you have more homeschoolers coming. It's also very common for kids to have asynchronous skills, meaning they're really highly advanced in one area and less advanced than you would expect in another. For instance, my daughter, when she was like 11, was reading and understanding Shakespeare and delving into, like analysis of Shakespeare and all this other crazy stuff, but she was really having trouble figuring out fractions. So that's pretty common. I know another young woman who she graduated from college with honors, is now working for a college, but didn't learn to read until she was 10. And the reason she learned to read was because she wanted to fix the lawnmower. So and at that time, I think she also like was very close to having a black belt in a very rigorous martial art. So, it worked out fine for her, but it's not that uncommon for kids to really move forward fast in areas that they're passionate about or really excited about, and then be a little bit farther behind maybe their age group peers about things that they're a little less interested in or naturally skilled at or something like that. Um, Another thing to be aware of is a lot of times homeschoolers are pretty sensitive to being judged, and that's partly because, well, like if someone finds out a kid is homeschooled and immediately they go into like quiz mode, like who is the first president of the United States and when were they in office, and what would you do if you were working in a store and someone gave you a dollar bill for a 73-cent item or something like that, and just put kids on the spot, and that's just pro tip. Don't do that. It's never a great way to make friends with kids anyway, but including homeschoolers. So, and then just to be aware that there is a small minority of homeschoolers that's very wary of any government interference. So privacy issues can be especially important, which is not a big deal for librarians because we're good at that. But it's just something to be aware of. And then finally, there are some great service options beyond programming. We're going to hear about some really great programs from some of the other presenters, but connecting families with each other is one of the hugest things that libraries, I think, can do, both with homeschoolers and non-homeschoolers. Finding out about open homeschooling groups and kind of their perspective can be really helpful to help other families find someone, especially if they've just started homeschooling or if they're new to the area. Finding a group of other folks to be with can be really important. Some libraries host things like curriculum swaps or book swaps so that homeschoolers can come in and share swap materials with each other. Developing relationships, of course, is just like key to any kind of service. And then fostering volunteers, you might find that this is a really great group to tap. A lot of times, maybe you've already discovered this, but a lot of times homeschool teens tend to have a little bit more flexibility in their schedule than um, teens who are in public school. And then collection development is kind of a universal thing. Most libraries don't collect curriculums, and that's perfect, or curricula, and that's perfectly reasonable. But having a well-rounded collection and including some libraries include things like kits that are to be checked out by anyone and are kind of universal design. But homeschooling family might find it especially wonderful to be able to check out something like a microscope or a telescope or something like that, binocular, a bird watching kit or something like that from the library. You might find your homeschoolers are especially excited about offerings like that. And some libraries find that people interlibrary loan gets to be kind of a big thing for some uh, homeschoolers. You might find that people are asking for things that are have been out of print for decades and maybe are out of date. That doesn't mean that you should necessarily have them in your library. And some libraries struggle with like, well, if I withdraw these, books that no one else is checking out, my one homeschooling family is going to be distraught. Well, maybe that family, you could make sure that that family has first dibs at that at the book sale or something like that. Um, and then finally, learning how to use the library and databases can be really useful. I think a lot of homeschoolers feel like they really are really great really great library users, but might not know about things like teachingbooks.net or even some of the other resources in Badgerlink. So it's a fun thing to introduce people to as well. And related to that, I think I personally think homeschooling and National History Day is a really awesome connection. There's a really great potential connection there, but I don't know how many homeschoolers know about National History Day. And so if you have, I think it's a great way for libraries to, it's a great vehicle for libraries to be able to show homeschoolers the rich databases that are available to us for free here in Wisconsin. So I talked a little longer than I meant to. Sorry, everyone, and we will move on. Here's my contact information if you want to reach me, and we'll move on to Sarah.
Okay, hi everyone. And are everyone able to see my screen, Leah?
No, because I forgot to change presenter. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Here
No
we
problem.
go. Thank you for reminding me.
There we go. Okay. So, my name is Sarah. I am the Youth Services Librarian here in Beaver Dam at the Community Library. And I also, like Leah, have a background with homeschooling in a couple of different ways. I have two children who are now 14 and 17, and our homeschooling adventures started basically at their birth. So we have homeschooled, we've unschooled, which is another type of homeschooling philosophy, which follows interest-led learning and ties in very well to some of the things that Leah talked about, where the asynchronous learning, unit studies and types like that. I also have a daughter, one of my daughters chose to go into public school. She's been very successful with that. And then my other daughter is currently in an online charter school, and next year we'll be doing a blended learning where she'll be on site at our local high school, as well as taking some online courses that they don't offer there or that she would prefer to take online. So one of the things that I also did growing up with them in this area, we are in a rural area outside of Madison, and Madison has a lot of great homeschooling groups that we knew people in when we started before they were actually formally school age. When we moved here to Beaver Dam, we did not have an organized homeschool group in the area. And later I did find one, but it was a religious-based one, and our family was in the secular homeschooling group. So what I did was, over time, built up a number of friendships with other homeschoolers that we typically met in a park. That's one way that homeschoolers identify each other, is being in public spaces during the day with school-age children. And then you say, I homeschool, you homeschool, okay, let's get together or organize something. So we ended up having a homeschool group that typically met on Fridays for a park day during good weather. We also experimented with some skill sharing and other things, but as families' lives changed and I moved into full-time librarianship, we let that go, and another family is now carrying that on. But my background has allowed me to see that even in the same family, there might be a variety of different needs. And I know one of the things we talked about in our description was that we would give you some simple ideas to take the programs you're doing now and make them friendly for homeschoolers. So these are the three that I've used, and one of them is to advertise programs by age, not grade. So if you do have a Lego club or a teen program that you want to make sure they have the skills to complete that program well, then one way to do that is to say ages 11 and up, for instance. That way, as Leah had mentioned, those students who are not identifying by grade level and are instead completing the K through 8 box on their DPI 1206 form don't feel stigmatized if they're not relating to that grade level. Another thing that you can do that ties in is to building the personal connections with the homeschoolers is to collect their email addresses if they're amenable to that, to add to your event calendar mailing list. I know many of us share our events calendars with the public schools, with the parochial schools in our area perhaps, as well as the many other places we share that. It can be great if you have either a homeschool listserv that you can share that with, or just simply adding individual homeschoolers so that they can help you get that word of mouth out and be aware of your offerings. The other thing that you can do as you're talking to homeschooling families is connect your current programs to learning skills and opportunities. For instance, emphasizing it's totally slipping my mind. But in Lego's problem-solving abilities, if you are doing a Wisconsin Science Fest event, for instance, one of the things, I've been doing those for years when I was formerly at the Horicon Public Library, and here I'm asking the homeschooling families if they would like to organize a science fair that we would host here at the library and give them a arena to showcase their science skills if they're interested, or to try something like that out. So those are my three simple tweaks. And then, as I mentioned, when I was in Horicon for 5 years prior to coming here to Beaver Dam in October, I had a pretty strong base of homeschoolers who were attending my regular programs. And when I came to Beaver Dam, I decided that it was important to reach out to them. So because of my familiarity with the area, this is where I lived and where I had formerly organized a homeschool group, I decided to start with a community meetup. I know that in talking to homeschoolers as they age, sometimes, especially in rural areas or for secular families, it can be difficult to find others who are doing what you're doing. And that sense of community is very important to them. So that's the example of my flyer there. And I put it in the newspaper and a variety of other resources to reach people. I had a great turnout. 53 people attended. We had kids, babies to teenagers. We had families come from neighboring communities up to 10 miles away, which really showed me that we were hitting a need that they had. We had some light refreshments, and the activities I had varied. I had blocks and Legos on the floor for the younger kids. We had a button making activity where I used the homeschool icon that was there in the middle so that they could make a button that said I'm a homeschooler and feel some pride in that, as well as some paperclip washi tape bracelets. So we had some coloring activities so that there were things to do as the families mingled. Another important aspect of this was the survey that I administered, and it's a simple Excel spreadsheet. If anybody would like it, my emails and my contact information later, I'd be glad to share that with you. But what I was looking for was how and why are these families currently using the library? What are their program interests? What would they like to learn more about? And what kind of age groups are visiting and using us primarily right now? So the next thing, the results that I compiled showed that the families in my area are mostly interested in the social activities, the arts and crafts type programs, and do-it-yourself programs. Science did rank up there, which is why I'm looking at the Wisconsin Science Fest event. And all of the activities that they were interested in nurture those 21st century skills that are important to all learners. And so because of my interest in unschooling and my success with that, and that suits me as well, my style, I gravitate towards interest-led programming. So finding out what my community wanted was important to me, and then looking at their input and developing programs that match those, that don't tax our staff, because I am the only youth services librarian in the department. And that leads me to the next step, which is harnessing the power of volunteers and creating leadership opportunities for teens while meeting their social needs. So one of the things that happened is that in talking to the families, they wanted other opportunities to come together and be social. And so one family enjoyed playing board games, and they were amenable to helping convene the space. So we're providing the space. I'm in and out of the room. The library provides some of the board games as well as some light snacks. But this family is in charge of the room, so that allows me to also be on the floor and available for reference questions. So this is a great way to tap into your volunteers and let them share skills. Let's see. The next thing that I found out that they're interested in, and so this is a developing program that I'm planning for fall, is a lot of families indicated interest in learning about the ebook and e-audiobook resources. So I will be doing some specific programs that instruct them how to use these, what's available, and the rich resources available, as well as Badger Link and the language programs that my library offers, such as Rosetta Stone and Mango Languages currently right now, and Rocket Languages. So I will be developing just some introductory courses for those purposes in the fall. Another thing that's important is I've heard from a number of families with teenagers that it's really difficult for their teenagers to connect with other homeschooling teenagers. Many of them have friends who are public schooled, and they enjoy those relationships as well, but it can be great for them to connect with other homeschooling teens. And this is where we as librarians have a perfect opportunity to have that and provide that. So they're a great resource to tap if you need assistance with your programs, as well as helping them to develop skills and assets, perhaps to develop some of their portfolio for high school, which can be a concern. Leah talked about how many elementary school students there are and that many homeschoolers enter high school. Well, the diploma is a very important thing still to people. And so for those families who choose to homeschool through high school, many of them are looking to develop portfolios that they can use as they go on in their either professional or educational lives after high school age. And so we're positioned to help them with that and provide letters of reference and perhaps help them develop the skill set for their first job. So one of our teenagers in town does special effects makeup, and she's very into film. So our library had been a little shy on our teen programming for a while. So one of the things that we'll be offering this summer is a film lab. I had a meeting with her, and she developed an 8-week curricula that will have a 1-hour course, and participants will learn about all of the different aspects of filmmaking, including lighting and makeup and sharing ideas, cutting and editing and audio, and this will culminate in a film festival in August. So I'll have to let you all know how that turned out at WLA. We're hoping to have several films. I know we'll have at least one from the organizer of this event. So that wraps up what I had to say, and I want to leave time because I'm very interested to hear Kathy and Ashley's presentation. So if you have any questions, you can ask us afterwards or feel free to contact me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I am going to change the presenter now to Ashley.
All right. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yay, good.
Yay.
I was worried. All right. So here at the Kaukauna Library, we started a homeschooling class in 2015. It's called Nature Journaling, and it was so successful that we've actually added a second weekly class called Homeschool Discover History in 2016. And the library currently has about 100 attendees between the two classes each week. So it roughly increases our statistics by about 2,900 a year, which is pretty awesome. So the idea actually came from one of our most avid homeschooling parents. She was looking for classes, but she also indicated that she really struggles with art instruction for her children because it's not something that she personally feels accomplished with. So because of that, she wanted to explore with us the opportunity for a class. And so that was how that class was born, and we used the book, The Nature Connection, an outdoor workbook for the first year that we ran this class. The class meets weekly from September to December, and then takes a break, and then meets again January to April on Thursdays from 1:30 to 2:30. We do require registration. A schedule is given to registrants beforehand, and then class meets at the library some weeks, and then on other weeks we either meet at the local nature center or at a park. The class consists of in-time class time and then also outdoor nature exploration hikes. And the class is for all ages. However, one child needs to be at least school age for the family to participate. The class was inspired, our Homeschool Discover History class was inspired by a staff member we have who just happens to love history, and our homeschool parents were so excited about nature journaling that they asked for more. So this class meets from September to December, and again January to April, Fridays from 1 to 2. This class also requires registration. It features a yearly topic. So the first year they did Greek and Roman history, and the next year they did medieval history, which is our current program now. So my programmer does a 20-minute lecture, and then after that she does hands-on crafts or projects or activity times. This class is also intended for school-age children, but siblings are welcome, and we are very careful in how we market these classes so that the parents do understand that the content of the history program is for school-age children. just so they know. And then homeschool nature journaling is more inclusive for everyone. Staffing, that's always of concern for a lot of smaller public libraries. So we actually started, since we don't have different departments at our library, now whenever we hire someone, unless we're trying to fill a specific need like cataloging, we actually hire all our assistants with an emphasis in programming. So they're hired knowing that at some point they may be teaching one of our classes. So this has helped increase the amount of programs we can offer. And it also helps with burnout too. I'm not responsible now for programming for all the ages, even though my title shifted from children's librarian to programming librarian so that I could be working with all ages. A little bit about our library, because of course when you're thinking about starting new programs, it's always nice to know what size of a library is already doing so many programs. We serve a population of a little over 15,000. We have 4 full-time staff people and 9 part-time staff people. In 2016, we had 482 programs with about 13,000 participants. It has really helped us to start to hire mostly programmers for our small library for all of the part-time staff, because a couple of years ago we were only having about 5,000 participants at programs, and we've in just a couple of years really increase the number of programs and participants that we have in programs. And it also really increases the diversity of what you can offer, because we found that everybody on staff has different unique talents. So now we can really tap into those talents. I have somebody that had originally decided they were going to go to school to be a naturalist and then changed their mind, but is still really into nature. And so he's been helping out with some science programs that we have. I have people that are interested in coding, so they are teaching our coding classes. So it's really neat to be able to tap into things that people really love, because then they're really excited to teach about that as well. Marketing. The best way to market is using those homeschool parents. As mentioned previously, during the day when you see school-age children in your building, most likely, if it's not during one of the area schools breaks, they're probably a homeschooling family. So once you know who those key parents are, all you have to do is utilize them. Our parents were so excited when we first created this class that, they were just telling everybody about it, which was awesome. So once you find that one person, they'll put it on their social networks. They may already have formalized groups. I even emailed the exact wording that I wanted from our website for one of them to post to one of her lists, which was really awesome. And so we also, of course, use Facebook, Twitter, our local newspaper, city newsletters. We use paper program guides on our website to advertise. Budget's always obviously a concern, but you don't really need a large budget to have homeschool classes. It's just like any other program you offer. We actually require families to provide their own sketchbook for class for nature journaling, just because our class has like almost 50 people in it. We often also post lists at our service desks of, things that we might be doing for projects. So once we create sort of our guide as to what's going to happen in the class for parents, they know ahead of time we may be making our own butter and need some baby food jars. And so we post those at the desk, and then also let the families know in advance that if they have any of that, it would be lovely if they could bring it in for us. And then, of course, paper crafts are great, and the dollar store is even better. Some insights that we've learned over the last 2 years with our homeschooling classes. We did not start with required registration. It was something that had to be added on just because we became so popular, and the class size is just, with only one instructor, it's difficult to have, a class of 50. Of course, the parents in our 2 classes are in the room with their kids. It's a little easier if you can kind of set your limit as to what you can handle as the presenter yourself. If your class is going to build upon itself, it is good to create that syllabus of the course. We do often struggle with families that register and then only show up when they feel like it. But both our classes work on a special project all year, and then they showcase them in May. So for example, this year, our students were in our nature journaling class, they were looking at birds in Wisconsin. And so one of their special projects, besides a painting, was making this huge plaster sculpture goose. And so we had all these geese that they were making, and it was a multi-step project. And so it was difficult when families would just show up sporadically. Their goose wouldn't be done, or it would be something that my staff person would have to do for them. So they weren't really getting that much out of the class because the staff was doing it and for them. So we did have to build in the expectation now that if a family misses more than 4 classes in the first semester, they'll be dropped from the class, and we will add another family onto the wait list. This just unfortunately was necessary. And as we mentioned, there's lots of different families that are homeschooling. So maybe for some families, at first we weren't clear enough with our expectations. It's something that, like any good program, you're going to learn what works, what doesn't work. And so that's something that we've had to sort of work in now, as we've learned that it works best for our classes to have this special showcase because they want to invite family and friends to see the work that they've worked on all year in our class. And so because of that, we do have to be clear in our marketing that we do have an expectation that this is a class that, attendance is necessary for, because otherwise they will fall behind in some of the work. Just like we mentioned before, the homeschool families want classes that their entire family can attend. So programming for all ages is really essential. And this is where it's important to be clear in your descriptions what your expectations are. Another thing that we've even more recently talked about is that with the nature journaling class being as large as it is, my instructor would like to really delve in a little deeper with some of the older children. And so we had even tossed around the idea of putting the wall up in our program room with a little, hole to go back and forth, but one side would be some of the older school-age children working on a special project together, and then have some different activities going on the side, still learning activities, and still, to tie into what the older kids are doing, but so that the younger kids are working at their particular age level while the older students are working at their age level. And so, like any good program, we're going to keep modifying it until we really have the best program that we can offer to families. Our families here, and this is different everywhere you go, indicated to us that they really prefer afternoon programs. They really like to work in their homes in the mornings, and then move to the library during the afternoon, and that they also prefer later in the week. A lot of our families indicated that Thursdays and Fridays were their preferred day for their school schedule to be here. It's also really good to look at what other libraries close to you are doing with their homeschoolers and tailor appropriately. We just happen to be lucky that our 2 closest libraries do not actually offer any homeschool programs right now, which I attribute some of our success to that. We are filling a need that is not out there currently in our area. And even then, our programs are very, very specific programs, so they can obviously be replicated, but they are a little different than some of the drop-in activities that a lot of other libraries offer as well. So if you do have any questions about the 2 specific classes that we offer here, please feel free to email or give me a call. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Ashley. And I'm going to change your presenter to Kathy.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
Not yet.
How about there?
Now we do.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
All right, so my name is Kathy Larson. I work at the Bloomer Public Library. It is about 30 miles north of Eau Claire, so we're in northern Wisconsin. The city of Bloomer has 3,500 people in it, and our service population is not quite 1,000 people. I'm just going to go over a little bit about what I did with my homeschool stuff. So you want to have a homeschool club. What are some things you need to think about? Some of the reasons I asked myself why I'd want to do this. I heard about it from another library, and homeschool parents, I noticed, check out a lot of books and other kits and stuff, and it's a great way to boost circulation by having homeschool people come to your library. And then also, because we're rural, our funding comes from people who live in rural areas. So I'm getting people to go use our library as opposed to like Chippewa Falls, which is a little bigger library to the south, is one way you can kind of draw people into your library. So that was another goal that I had. All right, and then I talked to, as I actually had mentioned before, learn about those key parents. So I had a mom that I was pretty comfortable with. We talked a lot when she visited the library. And so I talked with her about if she was interested in a homeschool program and what kind of things she would like to see if there was a homeschool program. And so we came up with 3 basic tenets. We were going to work on getting kids used to public speaking, giving kids an opportunity to work in groups together, and then also letting kids work with different adults besides their parents. So those were the 3 goals when we started the program in 2013. First thing I would say is establish some boundaries and goals. So be very clear on what your expectations are for the program. I say that it's a school age program, and I've had kids as young as 4 come in, and I've had kids that are probably 12 or 13 come in. I don't say kids can't come in. If they're really little, I just tell the parents, hey, we're doing stuff that they need to be able to write or read maybe, and so it might not exactly work for them. But the parents are at the library, so they can always go find them if they are not interested in what we're doing. And then second, parent involvement. As a teacher, as a homeschool teacher, sometimes they want to know what their kids are doing and who the adults that they're working with are, which is great. I always say they're your kids. Feel free to stop in or be in. If you want to be in the session, that's great. I would never tell a parent they can't go where their kids are. And then also the time. We let our parents know ours is an hour program. Well, sometimes we go over, but generally they stay in the library for at least 2 hours anyway. So if we go over a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. And then the library space. So while the kids meet in a community room, the parents oftentimes meet in the library space. And so I included a picture of our poor little broken train table that got broken once and the homeschool kids were out in the library space. And so when the parents are meeting, the kids tend to not be as supervised. So we've kind of had problems with that at our library. So that might be one thing that might come up. I don't know. It might be special for our library. But something to be aware of is make sure that you're clear on your expectations in your library space. Okay, and then I have worked at several different education places. I worked at Head Start. I worked at 4-year-old kindergarten rooms. And one of the things that we were always emphasizing was that there's a routine. So when I do a homeschool club, we always do the same things. We start with a warm-up or energizer game, and then we have a main activity that we do. And then at the end, we just have a little bit of a, hey, how'd that go? Or what did you think about talking in front of people? Or whatever we worked on, they just go over and rehash a little bit with the kids. So we'll start out with energizers. So the way I find energizers is I look on Google or I use Pinterest a lot, and I do searches with team building, energizers, and cooperative games. The kids really get like this activity, and it gets kids who are shy, kind of forces them to work with other kids. And then also getting sibling groups to kind of break up a little bit and work with other kids that aren't their siblings is kind of another goal that I have for the kids. And so with doing these cooperative games, gets kids to know each other. Yeah. All right. And then some of the main activities that I do. So this bottom link down here is a link that talks about how to help kids learn about public speaking and kind of the steps and ways you can go about. So one of the things they emphasize is group work. So we do a lot of group work, but then the way I start out is I do an all about me poster at the beginning. And it's been kind of a learning curve. The first year I had parents do homework before they came, so they all brought their all about me poster with them. And that was okay, but a lot of kids didn't have one, or they had different things and expectations. So it didn't work really great. So then the next time we did the all about me posters as a group, we worked at tables, and big kids helped little kids fill theirs out. And I went around and helped kids that didn't know how to write or spell, and we worked on that. And then now they do their own posters, and they all present them in front of the group. And sometimes I do a lot of hand holding, just getting kids to come out of their shell. So if they can't read, I help them remember what they wrote. And it's been great. We usually get about 15 to 20 kids, sometimes 30, but talking in front of that many people is really overwhelming for even me sometimes. So it's great to get kids out there in front of people. So that's one of the things we do. We also do a lot with like engineering challenges. They really like to do these kind of projects, and then I have them work in groups. And the way I choose the groups for the kids is I have them do an energizer where they have to line up by age or line up by birthday or height. So then I can count them off by 4s or 5s and mix up the ages so that some of the littlest kids are with some of the biggest kids. So there's a variety of ages in each group so not all the big kids are together. And then it also helps break up sibling groups. And then you can see the different roles. It's kind of interesting when a younger kid takes more of a leadership role than a bigger kid. So it's kind of fun to watch the dynamic of the kids. It's been really eye-opening for me to do the homeschool club. It's been really fun. So we do these engineering challenges. We also have done some readers theater. I usually pick stories that are really familiar. As you can see in the picture, we did the Three Little Pigs. And I usually try to do something familiar because kids already know the storyline. So even if they can't read the lines, they can still kind of go along with what they know the story is supposed to be like. So that's another activity we do. I try to do one book activity where we talk about the parts of a book, the illustrations, how authors develop storylines and publishing books. So we always try to do one bookish themed activity. And this one, we used a Mad Lib to do a story one year. We did the Three Little Pigs this year, and the kids got different characters that weren't pigs. We read the Three-Bit Aliens and the Big Bad Robot, and then kind of showed them that fairy tale spoof. So they did that. And then we put the books in the library, and the parents are really excited to see them. Another thing we work on is listening and following directions, because a lot of times in group sizes, kids have a hard time with that in general. So we play games where you have to shake a dice and add hair or a hat. That was that one. And then the other one was moving around the room and talking about what kids have in common or not. So that was kind of another energizer and listening and following directions thing. And the last thing that we do every year is an edible book fair. I saw this idea on Pinterest somewhere, and it's been really fun. The kids, it's like our end of the year party. And so they all bring something in, they send a book, and then I have the kids read the book, or I read the book, or they just do a summary, because a child did a chapter book one, so he just kind of did a little book talk about it. So this part's fun. A lot of times parents come in for this, and the younger siblings come in for this. It's a great way to end the year. So that was our last thing we just did last month. And then I included everybody's contact information at the end in case anybody wanted to see it. And it'll be up here for a little while longer. So we only have a few short minutes left. So I went kind of quick so that there would be time for questions if anybody has questions.
There are questions, so thank you, Kathy. I have someone who says, as a librarian, I don't have a training in class instruction. Ashley, what resources did your staff use to plan and deliver effective instruction to homeschool families? Oh, I'm not hearing you, Ashley. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me
Yep,
now?
now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I have to keep unplugging my microphone. Anyway, not much training, to be honest, at all. The particular programmer that had taken on the nature journaling class was one of my story timers, and she does the 3 to 5-year-old class. So really, the first year that she did it, she really just worked from that nature connection book, and through that and just trial and error with the kids, she developed like the curriculum for the next year and how she wanted it to run. So really, not much instruction whatsoever. If you have any programming experience, I feel like you would be just fine, because it's not so much, you are teaching, but the classes that we teach really immerse themselves in what they're doing, and we're just kind of giving them the pointers in the right direction. Same with the history program. The person that teaches that, again, she has a bachelor's degree in history, but she's never been a teacher or anything like that, and she just puts together a little 20-minute lecture, and then after researching, and then after that they do their activities. So it's pretty much the same as any other class that we teach.
Excellent. And then we have some people who are asking for things. Some people are looking for links to the or the information about the survey that Sarah talked about, and maybe Ashley's syllabus and Kathy's lesson plans. So maybe we'll work on that after we're done. We'll figure out how to get that together. And Kathy, you can just keep your screen up there. That's perfect if you don't mind. We'll just keep that those contact information up there. And then we have another question here. Kathy says that she always allows parents in if they want, but are there times when you require them to help? Or does that make it too tricky or crowded? Do the parents want to help mostly, or do they prefer to relax and browse in the library instead?
Okay, so the first year the parents came in quite a bit actually, and I've had the same group of kids come back every year with new kids coming in. And so I think the more comfortable they get with me and know that I'm not going to push boundaries or step on toes or things like that, then they kind of step out. Now it's mostly they just come in to make sure their kids are behaving, and then they go out to the group again. So if they notice I'm overwhelmed, they come in and help, and that's great. I don't make them help, and I'm very open to helping or letting parents help. So does that answer the question?
Great. Super flexible, it sounds like.
Yes, super flexible. Stay super flexible. People like that.
That's kind of one of those universal design things. Everyone likes that. Okay, let me see. I'm just making sure that we don't have any other questions stacked up here. I think that's also when you get a follow-up, we will, it may not be in the initial follow-up, all the links to various things, but we will try and create kind of a robust handout session, thing, so that people have access to some suggestions of lesson plans, and hopefully Sarah can share more about her survey, and Ashley can share a little bit more about her syllabi and lesson plan type things. And if it looks like we have just a few more minutes, if anyone has anything more to mention, or if any of our presenters had anything that you were censoring yourself and wish you had had time to say.
Oh, I forgot to say one thing, Leah. I created a mailing list with my homeschool parents because sometimes we have snow days, and I wanted to be able to communicate with them about if we were closed or not, or if something came up, because I'm the one that runs the programs. So if I wasn't here, so I think that having a mailing list is great, and then also you can send them your promotional other event stuff.
Cool, that's great. We have
and then I would just add, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, Ashley.
In regards to the parents in or out of the room too, both our classes, we encourage the parents to be in the room. And I have noticed that sometimes the parents will stay in the room for a few minutes, and then they may just casually go out with their smaller kids and leave their bigger kids in the room. And around here where we live, a lot of homeschooling families are really close. And so different parents take different kids to different classes. So one family may have two students that come with another family every week, and that's always how it is. So again, I think that's just, you want to build in whatever your expectation is into your class. And that's something that you'll sort of learn as you go. We haven't had to put any rules in per se about that. Beyond, it is helpful if you're going to be doing art stuff to have the parents in the room just for cleanup, because we noticed that with the art class, they were just leaving a huge mess. And actually one parent finally just stood up in front of all the other parents and said, you know what, we are leaving a insane mess. This is not fair. The library does this. Everybody needs to get in here and help clean up, which is really eye-opening, I think, for all of us, and really important. Just since library users have changed, today we don't see as many manners or as much mindfulness in the space, I guess. So I think that was really nice. And again, we had talked about expectations. That's also probably a good thing to start with is, we're all doing this together, and, we can all help clean up too.
Yes, that is a very good idea. We did get someone saying, would they recommend any magazines for homeschool families? Do you have any? There are some there are some very specific homeschooling magazines, and I Sarah, do you have anything off the top of your head?
There's, I believe it's called home education, and practical homeschooling is another one.
Mm-hmm. And I would say home education is one that has more of a, I think practical homeschooling has a little more of a religious lens, and home education is a little more, does not have that as much. So
that's correct, I
yeah.
believe.
And then someone said even if they can't apply all of this, they've learned a lot about finding the needs and wants of the homeschool families in her area. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And just making sure. Okay. I think that's about it. And it is 2:00. Thank you so much to Sarah and Ashley and Kathy for your great presentations. And I hope that you all have a great day and look for the follow-up information coming probably tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. And Kathy and Ashley and Sarah, I'll contact you and we'll make a plan for how to share out the other stuff that people were looking for, if that's all right.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Terrific. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.